Hi there. My name is Ben Martin, and I am a senior security analyst here at Sucuri. And today we're going to be diving into the topic of database malware and how to remove it from your website environment. So, every day, thousands of website databases on the web are targeted by attackers looking to steal, destroy, or alter website data and content. A hacked database can have severe repercussions for a website, including loss of sensitive customer information, damage to your website's reputation, and even legal consequences. A database hack occurs when an unauthorized individual gains access to your database environment, often by exploiting vulnerabilities in your website or server. Once inside, they can inject malicious code, alter your data, or even lock you out of your own website. This guide aims to educate website owners on how to detect and clean malware and spam from a hacked database, as well as how to protect it against future threats. So, why should you even care about database malware in the first place? The database of a website is an absolutely crucial component to most websites. While the CMS file structure provides the framework of the website, the database is where all of the actual content is stored. So, for example, when you write a blog post in WordPress, all of the text contained in that post, as well as a bunch of other information, resides in the database. This also renders it as a valuable target for attackers and spammers looking to misuse the resources of a website to peddle their counterfeit designer goods or steal credit card details. So, how do website databases get hacked in the first place? Understanding how a database becomes compromised is the first step in preventing future attacks. Here are the most common ways that an attacker can gain unauthorized access to a website's database. Number one is a SQL injection. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it's the language that's used to communicate with and manipulate databases. SQL injections occur when a hacker inserts malicious SQL code into a query. Often, this is done through website forms or URL parameters. So, for example, if you have a form on your website that asks for a user's email address, a hacker might input SQL statements instead of a legitimate email address. And if your website is not properly secured, these statements can be run against your database, leading to unauthorized access or data manipulation. From a CMS perspective, improper input sanitization in themes, plugins, or extensions may lead to SQL injections, giving attackers a direct hold over the CMS database. Number two, website malware is also another potential cause. Malware, short for malicious software, is a broad term that encompasses various types of harmful software, which we help clients deal with on a daily basis here at Sucuri. Once a website has been compromised and malware has been injected into the website or server, it can perform a variety of malicious tasks. With respect to the database in particular, the primary types of malware which we see are spam, malicious redirects, and credit card skimmers. The primary attack vectors, which allow websites to become compromised, are out-of-date or vulnerable software components such as plugins, themes, and extensions, as well as weak or compromised passwords. Number three are unpatched vulnerabilities. This is often how malware gets on the website in the first place. Hackers are always on the lookout for systems running outdated software, and they often use automated tools to find and exploit these vulnerabilities. If a software component in your website contains an unpatched SQL injection vulnerability, particularly if it's from a well-known or popular piece of software like a plugin or theme, then there's a good chance that the website will become compromised. And finally, weak or stolen credentials like usernames and passwords are often a cause of website and database compromise. If your database username and password are easy to guess, or if they have been stolen, they can be used to gain direct access to the database. This is particularly true if there are unattended database administration scripts laying around the website environment, such as adminer, or if remote MySQL administration is enabled. Compromised administrator users are often a common source of database spam, particularly as it pertains to spam posts in WordPress. Credentials can be compromised in a number of ways, from brute force attacks, phishing, or data breaches. Let's review the anatomy of a database hack. Tends to happen in a series of steps. The first being reconnaissance. This is the initial phase where hackers identify potential targets and gather information about them. They usually use automated tools to scan the internet for websites running outdated software or plugins with known vulnerabilities. Next is exploitation. Once a target has been identified, the hacker will move to exploit the vulnerability. This could involve using a SQL injection, uploading and executing a malicious script, or taking advantage of weak or stolen credentials to gain unauthorized access. What the attacker does is contingent upon what the vulnerability they exploit and have access to allows them to do. Next, they establish persistence. After gaining access, hackers often create a way to maintain access, even if the initial vulnerability is patched. This could involve installing a web shell or backdoor for remote access, or creating a new admin user which they control. Next is data access and manipulation. With access secured, the hacker can now interact with the database. They could steal data, alter existing data, or even delete data. Sometimes the goal isn't data theft itself, but the disruption of services. And finally, the more sophisticated attackers will cover their tracks. Hackers will often attempt to hide their activity in order to avoid detection. They might delete logs, alter timestamps, or use other techniques to make it appear as if they were never there in the first place. To help prevent exploitation, it's important to regularly update your website software, or better yet, enable automatic updates, and ensure that your website is being properly monitored for any malware or security issues. Next, in the event that your website database has been compromised and your website is infected, let's review the steps on how to actually clean it up. If the worst happens, there are ways to remove the malware. Cleaning a hacked database can seem intimidating, but by following some straightforward steps, you can remove the malware, restore your website's functionality, and harden it against future attacks. Step 1, of course, we have to log into the database. First things first. This is usually done through phpMyAdmin from your cPanel dashboard, or a standalone database administration script such as Adminer, or depending on your hosting provider, they might give you some different tools. But in any event, the login information for your database will be located in your website CMS config file, such as wp-config.php for WordPress within your site's primary directory. Next, we want to make a backup. The process of malware removal can at times be messy, and sometimes things can break. Before making any changes, be sure to make a full database backup. You may also want to make separate backups for each individual table that you will be working with. For example, in WordPress, this may be wp_posts or wp_options, or for Magento, it might be probably core config data. The reason for this is that if anything breaks and you need to restore the backup, it's way easier to work with smaller individual tables themselves rather than the full backup, which can sometimes time out when attempting to restore it. You may also want to consider testing your database backup for functionality, just in case, before proceeding. Now that we're logged in, we need to actually check the database tables and find what we're looking for. You want to start by identifying what you're actually looking for. Manually checking database tables and columns one by one is a fool's errand, so you need to know what you're actually looking for. You'll want to start by running your website through our Sucuri site check tool. It should flag any known malware or spam lodged in the website, and oftentimes this will be lodged in the database. This is particularly true for spam and balata malware. If you are noticing your website redirect to third-party websites or see any other strange behavior or content, take note of what they are so you can search for those particular strings. Once we've identified what we want to remove, run a simple search query using your database administration tool. This can be done using the search input functionality. For example, if your website is redirecting to maliciouswebsite.info, run a query for that domain to see if it might be lodged in the database somewhere. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a spam infection, you'll want to search for keywords identified by our Sucuri site check tool. Common words would include pharma products, essay writing services, torrents, knockoff jerseys, and online casinos. If you're seeing any weird spammy search results in Google or other search engines, you can also query the database for some out-of-place keywords that appear there. And as a short aside, if you're trying to get rid of a large amount of comment spam, you might want to use certain SQL queries like so. Select from WP comments where comment content is like gambling, just as an example. Now, take note that a query like this is going to completely delete the comments with certain keywords present. Keep in mind that lots of database malware and spam will be injected into otherwise legitimate posts and pages. So using a query like this on those tables can cause you to delete legitimate content from the website if used there. So you'll want to be very careful when running queries like this. Next, let's check for malicious JavaScript within the database. You'll want to search for common obfuscated JavaScript such as from Carecode or eval. Also, certain plugins and other software will base64 encode the contents of the database, and attackers will sometimes do that as well to hide their payloads. So searching for a string such as lowercase a, capital H, capital R, 0, which is the base64 encoded beginning for HTTP, will help find encoded links in the database, which might be spam or redirects. Now, if you're trying to fix a hacked Magento website, you may also want to query the website for all JavaScripts, standalone scripts, and investigate every single one of them. This will also include potentially malicious Google Tag Manager scripts. Next, now that we've searched the database for what we're looking for, we want to actually remove it. Depending on the nature of the infection, you may be able to just manually yank it out one by one. However, it's not uncommon for database injections to be comprised of hundreds or sometimes thousands of injections, and removing these by hand one by one would be prohibitively time-consuming. So for such instances, you can use a SQL command or query such as search replace, and this will make your life a lot easier. So here's an example command that will find a specified string in the database and replace it with the content of your choosing. And for the purposes of malware removal, you'd normally want to replace it with empty content. So that would be update WP posts, set post content equals replace, post content, followed by the text to find and the text to replace. These queries need to be properly escaped lest the command get truncated. So any instance of an apostrophe will need to be preceded by a backslash, and some other special characters will need to be escaped as well. So let's say, for example, we want to remove this fictitious JavaScript injection from WP posts. So a script loading from badwebsite.info stat.js. So we would run the following SQL query to get rid of that and replace it with empty content, thereby cleansing the injection from the database. So update WP posts, set post content equals replace post content, followed by the script, and then 2 empty apostrophes. So notice how the apostrophes from the malware itself all have a backslash before them. The reason for this is that MySQL syntax itself uses apostrophes, so without escaping them with backslashes, it would prematurely terminate the query and result in a syntax error. Placing the backslash before it causes MySQL to treat it as a normal character rather than as part of the query. Remember, manual code removal can be risky, and it might not fully clean your website if the malicious code has spread or if there are multiple variants present in your environment. Furthermore, sometimes content in the database is serialized, particularly if it's from the WP options table. An example of serialized database content might look something like this. Removing this outright manually from phpMyAdmin or adminer can damage your website and will force you to perform a restore, as doing so will break the serialization. So for such cases, it is much easier and safer to remove the malicious content directly from your WP admin panel or other CMS admin panel. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a spam post hack with many thousands of spam posts added from WP admin, these can be quickly removed by using a query like so. Update WP posts, set post status, send them to the trash if they're from a certain date onwards. Just make sure to specify the date properly. This will place the spam post into the trash, where any legitimate posts or pages that may have been deleted by accident can easily be restored. So, now the malware is removed. How do we secure your database after the hack? What do we do next? Always regularly patch and update your software. This should help prevent any vulnerabilities from being exploited by attackers. You'll also want to change your password and make it very strong. Change the password for the database and make sure to change all admin passwords as well. You'll also want to enable two-factor authentication on important user accounts to help prevent further compromised and unauthorized access. You will want to maintain regular database and file backups. Also, limit access. For example, review your user roles and admin users, and ensure that your website files and content are monitored for any security issues. And finally, we highly recommend using a firewall such as our Sucuri firewall. Now, with all that being said, if you would rather leave it to the professionals to get your database and your files cleaned up in the wake of a malware infection, we're here to help. Thanks for watching.